The phone in your hand can run entire worlds. Little characters who walk and talk and panic and fall in love. And if one of those characters ever got clever enough to stop and look around, it would swear on everything that its blocky little world was completely, obviously real. Which leads to a question that sounds like a joke, right up until you try to answer it. How do you know that you are not one of them? Long before the first computer ever hummed to life, humans were already losing sleep over this exact question. We simply have a shinier word for it now. This is not some late-night thought you have and forget by morning. It is a serious argument, taken seriously by philosophers and physicists. And the harder you stare at it, the harder it becomes to laugh off. So follow the logic, because it is colder and cleaner than you would expect. Just over 20 years ago, an Oxford philosopher named Nick Bostrom published a short 13-page paper with an unsettling question for a title. Are you living in a computer simulation? He does not start by shouting that reality is fake. He starts with one modest assumption, that some civilization, somewhere, survives long enough to build computers powerful enough to simulate a conscious mind. And we are already halfway there. Every year, our video games get sharper, and the little characters inside them get a little bit smarter. Now, a civilization that advanced would not run one simulation. It would run millions of them. Simulations of its own history, of its ancestors, of 1,000 different versions of what if. And every single one would be crowded with minds that think and remember and are utterly convinced that they are real. Picture it. Billions of simulated people, each with a name, a childhood, a favorite song, and not one of them with the faintest clue. So do the cold arithmetic. If there is one real world and millions of fake ones, how likely is it that you are sitting in the real one? Reach into that entire crowd of minds and pull out one at random, a mind like yours, reading these words right now. And the odds scream that the one in your hand is a simulated one, which corners you into a choice with only 3 doors. And you must walk through one. Either civilizations always wipe themselves out before they ever get that powerful, or they get the power, and then every last one of them chooses never to use it. Or we are almost certainly living inside a simulation this very second. That is the trilemma. There is no comfortable door. And then it gets worse, because people began to notice that our universe has features that look suspiciously like a computer running a program. Start with the speed of light. Nothing can move faster than it ever, no matter how hard it tries. Not one thing beats 300,000 kilometers a second. And every computer ever built has a top speed too, a clock rate it simply cannot cross. A universe with one hard, unbreakable speed limit looks an awful lot like a machine maxing out its own processor. Coincidence? Then there is the resolution. Zoom into empty space, closer and closer, and you eventually smack into something called the Planck length, the smallest distance that means anything at all. It is so tiny that if a single atom were blown up to the size of the whole planet, the Planck length inside it would still be thinner than a hair. Go any smaller than that, and the very idea of distance stops working, which means reality might not be smooth the way it looks. Underneath, it might be built out of pixels. And it is not just space. There is a smallest possible slice of time too, called the Planck time. And below it, a clock has nothing left to tick. So is time itself really flowing, or is it coming in tiny frames like the still images on a strip of film flickering by fast enough to fool your eye into seeing smooth motion? But here is the clue that should truly unsettle you. A tiny particle does not actually have a definite position until something measures it. In the famous double-slit experiment, before anyone looks, the particle is nothing but a blurry smear of maybes. And a video game does the exact same thing. It refuses to draw a room until your character walks in and looks, purely to save computing power. Our universe, unnervingly, seems to leave things fuzzy until someone checks, as if it too is trying not to waste resources, rendering what nobody is watching. It goes deeper still. Down at the very bottom, reality appears to run on information. Pure, countable, digital information. The physicist John Wheeler boiled it down to 3 words: it from bit. Everything comes from a bit. So, is the universe, deep down, not really made of stuff at all, but of information? And just a few years ago, a physicist named Melvin Vopson noticed something stranger. The information in our universe seems to be quietly squeezing and compressing itself over time. which is exactly the sort of shortcut you would build into a simulation to save space. He has even designed a real experiment to test it. When a particle meets its antimatter twin and the two of them vanish, he predicts a faint flash of extra light should leak out, the telltale heat of information being deleted, like a hard drive quietly wiping a file. None of this proves a single thing, but it is the kind of thing that makes a physicist slowly set down their coffee. Nobody has ever caught a definite glitch. No error message has ever flashed across the sky, but the clues keep piling up in odd, quiet corners of the numbers. So, are we ready to yank the plug out of the wall? Not so fast, because the whole case has a hole in it the size of a planet. To simulate an entire universe, every particle and every atom, flawlessly, you would need a computer at least as big and complex as the universe itself, which might simply be impossible, unless of course you cheat and only bother to render the parts that someone is looking at, which, annoyingly, is exactly what we seem to see. Notice how the argument keeps quietly eating its own tail. And here is the deeper problem, the one that truly matters. Can you ever actually test this from the inside? You cannot. Any glitch you dig up could just as easily be a feature. Any experiment you run is happening inside the very system you are trying to catch red-handed. Even the physicist proposing his clever experiment admits it could never truly confirm that we are simulated. And an idea that can never, ever be proven wrong is not quite science. It is philosophy, wearing a borrowed lab coat. And then comes the twist that gently puts the whole thing back in its place. Have humans ever not asked whether reality is real? In every single age we have asked it, and every time we have described it using our newest, shiniest machine. Long before computers, an ancient sage dreamed he was a butterfly, and woke up genuinely unsure which one had been the dream. Plato swore we were prisoners, chained inside a cave, watching shadows flicker across the wall and mistaking them for the whole world. The philosopher Descartes lay awake at night, terrified that an evil demon was piping a fake reality straight into his skull. When people built the first great clocks, all gears and springs and ticking wheels, they promptly decided the entire universe must secretly be clockwork. And now that we build computers, we are certain it must be a simulation. The story quietly rewrites itself to match whatever machine sits on our desk, which hints the question was never really about reality at all. It was always a mirror, showing us our own tools. So, are we in the Matrix? The honest answer is that we cannot know, and maybe, in the end, it changes surprisingly little. Because whether the atoms in your hand are real or flawlessly rendered, the warmth of someone's hand folded into yours, the first slow sip of coffee in the morning, the face of a person you love across a crowded room, they feel exactly and completely the same either way. And that feeling is the only reality you are ever actually going to touch. So maybe the clever move was never to escape the game or to catch it out or to prove the whole thing is fake. Maybe the move is to stop asking whether the world is real just long enough to properly live inside it. Because real or simulated, solid ground, or a glowing line of code, this is the only round you are ever going to get, so you might as well play it like it matters, because it does.